Scott, if you're willing to go live in post-war Liberia on our hospital ship, you can join us. And I was like, yes.
So, Scott, how are you, man? It's good to see you.
I'm doing well. It's good to see you. It's been a while. I wish this was in person, but and so it is. So it goes.
Yeah, so it goes. Oh, I'm sure we'll see each other soon. So there's so much to talk about. I want to talk about anything and everything, but I want to give you have like one of the most amazing, incredible stories that I've ever heard, and I loved your book. So I want to give you a chance to just tell the audience the background behind your story, and share your water. Maybe we can kick it off with that. You've done it 1,000 times. I'll make you do one more.
I don't mind. I'll start at the beginning. I was born in Philadelphia, raised in a conservative Christian home. My dad was a business guy. My mom was a writer. And when I was 4, there was this terrible tragedy where we got carbon monoxide poisoning in a new home that we moved into. And on New Year's Day, 1980, my mom walks across the bedroom and she collapses unconscious. She was the canary in the coal mine. And after a bunch of tests, they found these massive amounts of carbon monoxide in her bloodstream. Dad and I bounced back after the leak was discovered and fixed, but Mom never did. And she became an invalid. She became disabled from this point on for the rest of her life. So it was a weird childhood, only child, caregiver role. Mom wore masks for 40 years. So what happened to her body was her immune system just irreparably shut down, and she was unable to process any chemicals. So she had to avoid exposure to soap or car fumes or any sort of pollution. So she would walk around with these 3M, N95 type masks, and I would never see her face. I couldn't really touch her. I couldn't. I just kind of took care of her. I would slide food, under a door that she'd be able to eat. So that was childhood. Raised in the church, played piano on Sunday. I didn't smoke. I didn't cuss. I didn't sleep around. I was that good kid who took care of Mom. And I wanted to be a doctor when I grew up so that I could help cure Mom and then sick people like her. That didn't happen. I moved to New York City at 18 with a band to rebel against my very said conservative Christian upbringing, and just kind of woke up one day, Justin, and said, now it's my turn. I do want to have sex. I do want to drink. I do want to smoke. I do want to do drugs. I kind of want to explore the opposite of all of the rules. And I learned there was this extraordinary opportunity to do this and get paid. And it was called a nightclub promoter. So if you wanted to rebel, not only could you rebel in style, you could make a lot of money effectively partying for a living if you were good at this. So that was my ambition. Very different than wanting to be a doctor. I wanted to be the king of New York City nightlife. I wanted to be the biggest club promoter in New York, standing behind the velvet rope. And that then led a decade-long pursuit in that business, where I worked at 40 different nightclubs, throwing parties in New York City, throwing parties in Milan and Paris, and kind of chasing the scene around the world, chasing Fashion Week around the world. And, I probably got to top 8 of the food chain there in New York City. And we were selling $1,000 bottles of champagne, $25 cocktails. 1,000 people would line up outside the club trying to get in. Puffy sitting at table 1, Jay-Z at table 3, and me and my friend sitting at table 2, thinking that we were really important. And it was kind of a long moral decline over that 10 years, where I started with a pack a day, then 2 packs a day, then sometimes 2.5 packs a day. I was going to dinner at 10 o'clock, the club at 12, some disgusting after hours at 5 o'clock, and often stumbling home at noon, drugged out of my brain, taking an Ambien to come down and then do it all over again. So I had this life that looked great on the outside, but I was just rotting inside, morally bankrupt, spiritually bankrupt. And, unfortunately, it took me 10 years, Justin, to come to that realization that, oh my gosh, I'm the worst person I know. Like I'm living a meaningless, purposeless life. If I die, my tombstone's going to read, here just lies like a jerk that got 1 million people drunk.
No.
And I didn't want that on my tombstone.
How did you realize that? Was there a moment where
Yeah.
you were like, what am I doing?
Well, I was in South America in a party town called Punta del Este in Uruguay, and I was with the jet set, people flying down on private planes, and my girlfriend was on the cover of a fashion magazine at the time, and there was a yacht associated with the house that we rented. Like, this was it. We went out and we spent a couple $1,000s on fireworks. This is what should make us all deeply happy. The excess. And I remember there was this party on New Year's Eve, and I woke up the next day, and it was 1:00, and the party was still going on, and people were drunk and drugged out of their mind. And we were on this beautiful compound near the sea, and it was just like disgusting. And I remember I just wanted the music to stop, kind of in that moment, and then also metaphorically. I realized that there would never be enough. Someone would always have more. And that this pursuit of the better car, the more beautiful, successful girlfriend, the fame, the money, the status, it would just lead me to like total ruin. And I would die young, and I would die meaninglessly. And I wound up coming back to my faith, I think, in a very different way as a 28-year-old. Maybe without the religiosity and so many of the rules that had been kind of jammed down my throat. And, I remember coming across a line in the Bible about true religion is looking after widows and orphans in their distress, and then keeping yourself from being polluted. And I'm like, I am 0 for 2. I haven't done a single thing for, someone suffering, right? Any sort of widow or orphan category. And not only am I the most polluted person, I pollute others for a living.
Yeah.
And I think there was just something so simple about that, like opposite, that on that vacation, I said, I want to make a radical change. This is not a pivot that is needed. This is not a small course correction. I need to just think the 180-degree opposite of every thought. I need to, do 180 degrees opposite of every action. And that led me back to New York City, a couple months of kind of struggling and questioning and, what's next and what would I do? And then I got this radical idea to sell everything I owned and do 1 year of humanitarian service. And that was kind of this idea of like a biblical tithe. For the 10 years I'd wasted, I'd give 1 back in service to see if I could be useful, to see where that might take me. And, the joke kind of quickly became nobody wanted to take a nightclub promoter for a year of humanitarian service, because humanitarian service organizations are serious organizations full of serious people, not, drug club kids. Club rats. So I was denied by the first 10 I applied to Doctors Without Borders and World Vision and Save the Children and these orgs that I'd seen kind of advertised on TV, and nobody would take me. So I was very fortunate after about 10 rejections that one org said, Scott, if you're willing to pay us $500 a month, and Scott, if you're willing to go live in post-war Liberia on our hospital ship, you can join us. And I was like, yes, where do I sign? Here are my credit card details. When do you start? And they said, we start in 3 weeks. And just like that, my life changed forever in the most dramatic way. Going to Africa for the first time, joining this humanitarian mission, quitting smoking and drinking and drugs, and kind of walking away from this this life of vice to see where, act 3 of my life might take me.
So you got on the ship and went there and like went clean, got completely clean. Mm-hmm. Like just
I went out with a bang, Justin. I do remember the night before I had to surrender my passport and kind of become official volunteer crew.
Yeah.
I think I smoked 60 cigarettes. I had like 8 or 9 drinks.
Yeah.
I woke up with a banging hangover, reeking of alcohol.
Yeah.
But there was this sense of, there was something almost symbolic about this gangway and a 502-foot hospital ship that would then sail away to a new continent. And I could kind of leave my old life behind on land. I could leave all that stuff by the dock and then open up a new chapter, start a new journey. And it had to be extreme.
So what were you doing there, and what did you experience there?
Yeah, they took me on as a volunteer photojournalist, which I probably wasn't necessarily qualified to be a photojournalist, but I'd always taken pretty good pictures as a hobby, and I was a pretty good writer. I was writing for the local paper when I was 13 or 14, and loved English and writing. So what I convinced them was that if they allowed me this coveted role, this volunteer role as a photojournalist, I actually had 15,000 emails of people I'd gotten drunk. So I had a club list that I could immediately start communicating to. And, I kind of had a built-in audience that was just curious, like, where is Scott? Like, the last time I heard from him, he invited me to the opening of the Prada store in Soho, the new flagship store. And where's Liberia? Like, that's a country, on a hospital ship. So I kind of immediately went into storytelling mode. And, you know this part of the story, but my third day there, I was with all these doctors and these surgeons, and I learned that the government had given us a football stadium, a soccer stadium in the center of town to triage all the sick people who would come. And we had advertised the coming, Western doctors from 40 different nations, volunteers and surgeons. They're coming to West Africa. They're coming to help. And I knew that we had 1,500 available surgery slots to schedule. So, my thought was like, are there really 1,500 people this sick with cleft lips and tumors and, flesh-eating disease and cataracts, like all the stuff we were treating? And my third day there, I'll never forget, it was 5:30 in the morning. I put on hospital scrubs. I grabbed my 2 Nikon D1X cameras, full batteries, jump in a convoy of Land Rovers with medical personnel snaking through the city towards this stadium. And as we approached the stadium, I saw more than 5,000 people were standing in the parking lot waiting for us to open the doors.
Wow.
And that I remember just weeping. It hit me. Oh my gosh, we're going to send more than 3,000 people home without help, without being able to see a doctor. We don't have enough doctors. We don't have enough resources. And, Justin and I later learned many of those people had walked for more than a month. They'd walked with their children, from neighboring countries. And we had to say no. So that was really, really difficult. I kind of knew that I was in the deep end, and I tried to focus on the 1,500 people we were able to help. And I tried to focus on the good there. And my job as photojournalist was to document 1,500 sick people, many of them deformed, many of them with leprosy, many of them who had been burned by rebel soldiers who poured hot oil on them, to disfigure them. And I had to document every single person for the medical library before their operation and then after their operation. So I got to see these transformations. I got to see people who had massive cataracts see for the first time in a decade and be able to see their family or be able to see their children. So it was a really radically emotionally intense year. And I took 50,000 photos and I blasted my club list, and there were a ton of unsubscribes when people were just freaked out. They're like, I did not sign up for leprosy, stories or photos or videos. But for the most part, people they were moved to compassion by some of these stories, and they began to send money to this group, this hospital ship. They began to sponsor surgeries. Some people began to volunteer. and try to follow my lead as well, looking for purpose in their lives. So I guess I learned that the skill of promoting that had served me, poorly, and I would argue the world poorly for 10 years in New York City, could actually be redirected to promote the amazing, inspiring, redemptive, humanitarian work of these selfless doctors.
That's amazing. And when you were there, you learned something about another problem, right? And that's what led you to charity water.
Yeah.
So tell me about that story.
Yeah, well, I finished a year and I just didn't know what next to do. So I just signed up for another year, and we went to Liberia. We went back to Liberia. At the time, Liberia had one doctor for every 50,000 people living there. So just the system was just broken after a 14-year civil war, and people were really, really suffering. And I learned two things the second year. I learned that half of the country didn't have access to clean water. So 50% of the people living in the country were drinking dirty, contaminated, diseased water from swamps and ponds and rivers and open sources. And then I learned that half of the disease was because of that, because people were drinking dirty water and didn't have access to sanitation and hygiene. So for me, it was this kind of eureka moment. I found the root cause of so much of the sickness that we're seeing. And what if I, instead of promoting these expensive surgeries, which we were limited to a couple thousand, what if I went and worked on the root cause of so much of the global sickness and suffering around the world, which was dirty water, dirty contaminated water?
So how did you even go about figuring out how to start that? Like how to work on that problem? It's I think when we met, you said that there were 600 million people or something on that order.
About 771. So about a tenth of the planet.
Yeah.
It was worse back then, so we've made a bunch of progress. I was 30. I was super naive. I had no experience with philanthropy or running a charity or starting a charity. And I was broke because nightclub promoters are not great at saving money. We are fantastic at spending it, fantastic at spending other people's money, not really kind of good stewards. So I came back after this 2-year experience. I'd given all my money to Mercy Ships, the little money that I had, wound up coming back to like a $60,000 tax bill from my club partner. So it wasn't and I had no place to live. So it wasn't an ideal place to say, I'm going to be a social entrepreneur and go solve the global water crisis. But I think with so many entrepreneurs, this was a problem that I needed to solve. And I found a place to live, which was on a closet floor in Soho, in New York City, free rent, walk-in closet. It was carpeted. It was fine. And I was armed with about 50,000 photos that I'd taken, and I had them on a laptop. So I had this kind of eyewitness authority. I didn't just go on like a mission trip for 5 days and, teach some kids English or paint an orphanage, the 5th color that it was painted that year. I had lived there for 2 years. I had this experience. I'd walked with the doctors. I'd walked with people without water. And I just started going around and opening up the laptop and saying, here's what I saw. Here are the solutions. And I want to bring everybody clean water. And I need money to do that. And somebody gave me money to hire a lawyer to start a 501c3. And I remember like dummies, like starting a charity for dummies. I think they had a book like 501c3s for dummies. And then, the next thing you know, there were a couple volunteers working around this couch of my buddy's place in Soho, and we were raising a little bit of money. And, I realized, Justin, that as I was talking to people about this vision of a world where everybody had clean water, they liked that, but they were really cynical and skeptical when it came to charities.
Yeah.
And there was a, I don't know where my money goes. Are these people even competent? I found 70% of Americans believe charities actually waste their money. 70% of people believe charities waste their donations in some parts. 42% of Americans polled by USA Today at the time just said, we don't trust charities. So, I thought, man, if I'm going to solve a problem this big, like the global water crisis, I wonder if there's another better model for philanthropy, for running a charity that might invite the skeptic in, that might invite the cynic in. And the only person I'd come across that felt like had a really innovative model was this billionaire called Paul Tudor Jones. And he started a charity in New York called Robin Hood. And he said, I'm rich enough, I'm going to pay for all of the staff and overhead so that 100% of any donations coming into this charity will go directly to the people, who need them, and directly to the program. So I remember writing him a letter saying, Mr. Tudor Jones, I love your idea. Would you mentor me? And, of course that never works. And he never wrote me back. But I did go down to, it was Commerce Bank at the time, now TD Bank. And I opened up 2 distinct bank accounts with a few $100 in each. One where we would put all the public donations, which I called the water account, and then an overhead account. And I said, I'm gonna run these separately like church and state. I'm going to go and find business leaders or maybe entrepreneurs who could fund the overhead account so that we could promise to the public, every single penny, dollar, pound, euro, $1 million would go directly to the people who needed clean water. So that was kind of, the big idea, number one, not knowing how hard that would be, not knowing any better. And then the second idea was almost an extension of that. Well, if money is non-fungible, can't we use technology to track these small dollars down to the people or the water projects where those dollars were spent? And, I remember meeting the founder of Google Earth right when Google Earth launched. And I realized Google was building this free place where I could geolocate every water project we would fund anywhere in the world. And I could send a donor a satellite image of the well or the water system they paid for and bring this kind of new level of transparency and connection to the space. And then the third idea was just, I wanted to build this epic and imaginative brand. I wanted to build the Apple or the Virgin of charity that wasn't peddling guilt and shame and, had a terrible website and bad UI UX, but was inspiring, that motivated people to be generous, to help create this world where every human being had the most basic need met in clean water. So I put these 3 ideas together. 100% of the money goes. 2, we're going to look for ways to use technology to connect people to what they paid for, where the donations went, build this epic brand, and then of course work through local partners in each of these countries so that the work would be sustainable and culturally appropriate. So we would build the awareness, we would raise money efficiently, we'd build the movement, but we'd create thousands of local jobs if we were successful. And the well drillers would be Ethiopian or Cambodian, or Guatemalan, from these countries. And we would scale by creating local jobs in the local context. So that was it, man. Day one, the only idea I had, it was 15 years ago, was to throw a party in a nightclub. So I got a nightclub donated. I said, it's my 31st birthday. I'm going to give you open bar for an hour, but to get in the club, you have to donate $20. And there was this big plexi cube. And as people walked down the stairs to the basement of the nightclub, they had to throw $20 in. And Charity Water day one collected $15,000 in cash. We took 100% of the cash that, was carefully counted and documented and, photographed. And we took it to a refugee camp in northern Uganda, and we did our first couple water projects. And then a month later, we sent the completion photos and the satellite images back to all 700 people. And we said, you came to a party, some of you might not even remember coming. It might be a blurry night for you, but you gave $20. And because of that, people on the other side of the world are drinking clean water. Here, look at the proof. And the response, Justin, was so powerful of that simple feedback loop that we said, let's just keep doing this again. Let's bake this kind of proof loop into the business model.
Wow. And so you guys, that was a big innovation, like you talked about, was creating this loop, feedback loop. And I remember you guys innovated a lot with, kind of combining technology and allowing people to get involved and feel their involvement. with like kind of, Google Maps and then Facebook, and like how
Yep.
can you talk about some of those ways that you innovated?
Yeah. I mean, I think the first idea was just simply, let's just show people where the projects are. Let's hold, ourselves and our partners accountable. As we scaled, I mean, we grew really quickly. We did 2 million the first year, then 6 million, 9 million, 16 million, 23, 28, 35, 45. I mean, this was working like crazy. This 100% model was working. To pay for the overhead, I built this group of primarily entrepreneurs and a lot of people from Silicon Valley who actually got excited about paying for software engineers or water program experts or accountants, people in the finance team or the office when we had one. And then that allowed this kind of public movement to continue to scale. Probably the thing that I'm most proud of, that's also been one of the most difficult, is when we really did start scaling across 29 different countries and 1,500 local jobs created and 250 or $300 million raised. We wanted to know more about the long-term sustainability of these projects. And we know that about 40% of the world's wells are broken at any given time, but no one knows which 40%. And some of them are very old and some of them are new. And the best practice is I go build Justin's well. I send you a photo, you put it on your fridge, you and your family celebrate, and then you just kind of assume that everybody's living happily ever after. Well, that's just not the reality for a lot of communities. Sometimes a well will break and they can't fix it, or the money's not there, or the supply chain isn't there. So actually went back to Google and said, hey, I have this crazy idea. Nest is taking off, and we live in this kind of Internet of Things moment. What if I could create a smart well? What if I could connect a well in the most rural village in Uganda or Ethiopia or Bangladesh to the cloud, where the well could self-report its functionality? And if the well broke, that could start a system where a mechanic would go and act on that failure data and bring the well back online. This idea worked, and Google gave us $5 million as an innovation grant to go and try and work on this. We worked with 20 labs over the next 4 years. We produced our first sensor for the most common well in Africa. And then we dropped 3,500 sensors in Ethiopia. And the minute we did that, Justin, we actually got the largest data set in the history of the world when it came to rural water supply, because nobody hooks up, poor people's water systems. I mean, there's no financial incentive to do that. So we were monitoring over 1 billion liters of flow. And we also knew that 9% of them were non-functional, right? So then that led to this, okay, can we train mechanics? Can we equip them with motorcycles and toolkits to go out and act on the failed projects and kind of figure out what went wrong in the first place? And so this has led to, this whole now multi-million-dollar kind of R&D side of Charity Water, which is open sourcing these sensors. We're on version 3 of some. We're on version 1 of a pipe sensor now, and hoping that kind of shedding light on failed projects will help more people drink clean water in the long run. And it all starts with the knowledge. So in my perfect world, Justin, years from now, I know exactly how much a 10-year life cycle costs. I'm offering a donor the opportunity to buy a water project. Maybe there's a warranty with that, kind of like Apple Care. And then 3 years in, the well breaks, a mechanic, jumps on a motorbike, heads out there with the right tools and the right parts, and the community actually pays for that repair. So that the community's been collecting money through a water committee for the sustainability, but we've kind of helped put that infrastructure in play. And they know, it's like, imagine if you were living in a rural village and you dropped your phone and the glass broke, and then the next day, some dude turns up and says, our data shows you have a cracked screen. Would you like to pay me $50, please? And I'll fix your cracked screen. So that's kind of where we're moving towards, and we're still not there yet. And working in this environment is very difficult, and in this kind of supply chain moment in time, but we're making a lot of progress.
So, what's been the net impact, over the last 15 years of Charity Water?
We've raised about $600 million now from a million people around the world. We've kept the 100% model intact. So there are 129 families who pay for the overhead. More than half of them entrepreneurs, who have started their own businesses. And we've given 13 million people access to clean water. So 13 million is a lot. I think it's 750 Madison Square Gardens, where I'm from in New York City, full of people. So, Charity Water has sold out the garden 2 years in a row, but it's only 1/56th of the global problem solved. So it's about 1.8% of the way there with again, pretty simple, clear vision of a world where everybody has clean water to drink, regardless of where they live or regardless of what circumstances they were born into. So we're the biggest water charity in America by about 4x, but we're moving way too slow, and our ambition vastly exceeds our current capacity to raise money.
How do you inflect that? It must be both very rewarding but also frustrating in a way. It's kind of like being on that hospital ship where you have just the demand just far outstrips the supply, right?
It's incredibly challenging. And, so $600 million, I've spent 15 years raising that much. I know a bunch of people, Justin, as do you, who have built a company, created twice as much value in half the time and sold it. I have a friend who sold a gaming company for $1 billion, and it took him about 7 years to build it. Yeah. I'm working on clean drinking water for humanity, for human freaking beings. And I'm not at scale. I mean, it's interesting in social entrepreneurship circles. I get asked probably the number one question is a version of, did you ever think you'd be so successful? Did you ever think you'd build $100 million a year charity? And the real answer is this is a fraction of what I imagined would have happened 15 years in. This is a fraction of what is actually possible with all the wealth out there, with the, there's like tens of billions of dollars sitting inert in donor advised funds, in foundations. I have not, been smart enough or inspiring enough or created an organization yet that has moved enough money from these kind of, inert vehicles to the mouths of people who need access to clean water. So we talked just when we jumped on, you posted something on Twitter that I screenshotted, I shared with my whole team. I updated a little bit. It's a 27-year stock price of Amazon. And, the first 20 years is just a flat line, right? And then at year 20, you see this amazing hockey stick. And it's about these numbers, but in the first 2 decades, 7% of the value was created, 7% of the market cap. In the last 7 years, 93%. So Charity Water's at year 15. And, that was it. I guess, I believe the best is yet to come. We had a donor last year who I never had met, gave $10 million, a 38-year-old entrepreneur who exited a business and had heard me speak 7 years previous and kind of remembered Charity Water, remembered the work, looked us up. We said, absolutely know what to do with $10 million. Here's a proposal for you. So I think, sometimes you're just showing up, and that's a lot of people that are going to get clean water because of that. So I'm bullish about the future, but it's extraordinarily hard to raise money. It's extraordinarily hard to get people to care about a problem that doesn't affect them. Yeah. I'll bet that 99% of the people listening today have never had to drink dirty, contaminated, filthy water in their life. They have never had to walk 8 hours in the hot sun with 40 pounds of dirty water on their back, like so many of the women and children around the world do every single day. So, while everybody thinks water is a good idea, it's not political, it's not religious, it's just, it's just a good idea for people. It's very difficult moving people to action.
So
Although we've moved $600 million to action. So yeah, I kind of go back and forth with, we've done something. This is better than filling clubs, right? 13 million people with clean water is better than getting 13 million people drunk. But it's not where it ends.
got a ways to go, is what you're saying. But
Yeah,
I think that's right. Like that you're in the, the best is yet to come. Things take a lot longer than anybody ever thinks. And I mean, I really salute you for sticking with it this whole time. I'm curious, like, what's the impact been for you? You completely changed your life like 15 years ago or 17 years ago. And like,
yeah,
and how it reminds me of my own story in that I feel like I was very obsessed with making it in the material world and like achieving all of these things. And it was like very ego driven. And I don't think, like, I think a lot of people, like when I was working on Twitch, people would, I was an entrepreneur and it was very exciting. And people, I think often like people would have said, oh, Justin's one of the most creative people I know. Or he's living the most exciting life of anyone I know. But they wouldn't have said, he's the kindest, or he's the person who's there for his friends, the most, or, and I think that like I've spent the last couple of years really on a personal journey trying to change that, like be the person who I want to be in a much different way than like, kind of than I had pursued before. And
yeah.
I'm curious, you've been on that journey for like a lot longer, it's been like 15 plus years. How has that been for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, I realized the markers of success were not true success.
Yeah.
The car, the watch, the girlfriend, were you at the right place or the right party, or, in page 6. I think of it more maybe positionally. When I was only trying to meet my needs, when I was living for myself, like I was trapped, it's almost like you're in a cage. And when I had this life intention change where I said, well, how can I be useful? How can I give my time and my talent and my money in the service of others? How can I kind of look around and see some of the needless suffering and contribute to easing that, to stopping that suffering? There was such a freedom. It's like a big weight was lifted.
Yeah.
And, again, thank God that was 15 years ago, and I haven't had a cigarette in, 17 years. And, I ditched gambling and pornography and drugs and all those vices. So there's like a lightness to it. I get to get up and advocate for generosity and to invite people to be compassionate, to use their time and their talent and their money in the service of others, and then actually get to see the result of human beings drinking clean water. Today, Justin, 5,600 new people will get clean water thanks to the charity water community. And then tomorrow, another 5,600 people are going to get clean water. And then Thursday, another 5,600 people are going to get clean water. So kind of, in a 24-hour cycle, I know that 5,000 lives are changed because of this work. So is it hard? It's excruciating sometimes. I mean, in 2019, I did 88 flights. I fly coach. I've been to Ethiopia 31 times. Charity Water's never bought a business class ticket for myself or anybody else at the org. So, it's a grind sometimes. You're sleeping 2 hours a night. You're being protected by, soldiers with, huge caliber weapons in Central African Republic or Niger, or, some really sketchy parts of the world. But, I don't regret the clubs. I don't, my wife and I went out, I don't know, about a year ago, and we went to a club and it was 11 o'clock and there was nobody there. We're like, we can't wait for people to come. Like, this is like an hour past our bedtime. Like, we got to go home. Our kids are going to be up at 6:30 in the morning. So, I've been blessed with a great family. I've got a wife who I was able to work with at Charity Water for many years creatively, and 2 great young kids. And, you just show up. There was I guess my life's mantra is somebody sent me a picture of this sign outside a bodega in New York City over a decade ago. And it said, "Do not be afraid of work with no end. Do not be afraid of work with no end. And it's from an ancient rabbinic text. And, I think the idea of endless work used to scare me. Are we really going to get 771 million people clean water? Are we even going to make a meaningful dent? And I've come to kind of embrace that idea because it's really about the intention of your life. Important work in the service of others, being helpful, being useful, as you said, being a good friend, being a good father, being a good husband, committing the utmost integrity to work and relationships. It's the character that kind of matters. And, I imagine this day in my mind when we have everybody, the world celebrates, we all have clean drinking water, right? Well, I'm not just going to drop the mic and then try to go buy a Ferrari, and try and go get rich, right? I would take everything I'd learned. I would take this whole generous charity water community of givers and say, what's next? Are people hungry? Are people going to bed without a roof over their heads? Are there people that don't have access to healthcare? Or I think we would focus on another basic need. So I kind of love that idea. Like, don't be afraid of work that has no end. There's never going to be a moment in time when people are not suffering, when there are not needs in our local community and in our global community. It's just trying to run that race to meet them, and also living a healthy life and not getting burned out, and trying to take care of your soul and your body.
I love that. I think you used to really focus on everything, like it's a very Silicon Valley mindset, but like what's the scale of this? What's the outcome, and really be focused on only, I only want to do something that's super high impact as fast as possible, And what I didn't really realize is like when you're in service to somebody else, it's not just about like that. Yeah, of course you want to drive some impact, but it's not just for them, it's for you. It's to live a life of service and like to be in service to other people is something that's like good for you while you're doing it every day, regardless of whether it has some incredible high impact at that moment or not, And I think that's like an incredibly amazing realization, on your part. And I love that message. And I hope people out there listening, like really can try to manifest a little bit of that in their lives. So like made a huge, like I'm just incredibly a much happier person today, not in the pursuit of maximization than I used, than I was 5 years ago in the pursuit of maximizing things in my life, endlessly. Right.
And you're a lot more fun to be around, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Going back to like last time we talked about Charity Water, which a couple of years ago, you were working on turning it into a subscription.
Yes.
I don't know.
Business. Good memory. Yeah.
But you had innovated over the first maybe 5-7 years of Charity Water. There was this idea of like people were sharing it on social media. They were doing like birthday campaign drives. Yep. But that was more of like a one-time event, right? Someone's like, okay, I have a birthday. I'm like, raise some money, but then you don't collect from them, or they're not driving any activity for like a long time, maybe until their next birthday or maybe even longer. And you wanted to move to like a subscription, kind of like a Spotify or Netflix.
Yeah, I got to give Daniel Ek some credit. He came to Ethiopia to actually look at a birthday well that he had funded. And we were in the back of a Land Rover in rural Ethiopia. And, how I remember the conversation, he's like, dude, your business model sucks. January 1, no matter how much money you raised the previous year, your ticker rolls all the way back to zero. You have to go re-raise all that money and then grow from different people. And, he's like, well, that's not how, my business runs. Like, I acquire a subscriber, I deliver value to them. I want them to stay with me forever and then bring their friends. So that was really at the 10-year mark of Charity Water, the evolution of the spring. Let's launch a giving community, right? The average person has 10 or 11 subscriptions. Let's be the only one where they don't get music, or they don't get movies, or they don't get storage or free shipping. But 100% of their subscription helps people get clean water, the most basic need. And, we even pay back the credit card fees. So it's a true 100% of what people give. And, that 5 years later, that tripled the organization. That helped take us to a $100 million a year
Wow.
org. And about 23% of our revenue now is subscription. So it's 75,000 subs, members of the Spring across 147 countries. And they're giving an average of about $30 a month. So there are a lot of people, Justin, who can give $30 or $40 a month, philanthropically without missing it, but it really adds up. And it's then our job. We've been doing events for this community. We've been trying to serve up updates. We've been building out product online where they can track their impact, where they have affiliate links. You can see where your money's going. You can see your impact adding up over time as you consistently give month in and month out. And, that's really it's kind of stumbled into this new vision of, wouldn't it be cool to build the largest subscription giving community in the world? And no one has gotten to $1 billion. No one has gotten to $1 billion in recurring donations. There's a couple that are close in the 900s now, but they've been around for 70 plus years. And, to do that, you only need about 4 million subscribers. You only need about 4 million people to show up every month, right? Well, what does Disney Plus have? 100 million, in year one? I don't know what Spotify and Netflix numbers are, but they're over 150 million. So that's kind of, now big challenge. We don't have a marketing budget, and I'm actually not delivering you any product that you're using. So I need to invite people to be givers, to be generous, to care about others through this community. But that's kind of the big challenge that I'm embracing at 15 years. I mean, the TAM, the market opportunity of people who could care about clean water and who could give something every single month, knowing that 100% goes straight to people who need it and they can see that impact, feels huge to me. I'm not exactly sure how to get it to scale without the traditional levers.
Right,
I have a tiny marketing budget. Yeah, and I have a tiny marketing budget.
Like, have you thought about giving, and this might be a stupid idea, but like, can you give people something like Live Strong, like a bracelet for every year that they are a subscriber? So like
maybe. I mean, NPR, right, does bags, and there's a lot of kind of get a tote bag or get a mug.
Well, I mean, more something like visible, where like then if you're, or something that basically what works on Twitch is we have there's this concept of like subscribing to somebody, right, like a streamer, and you get they shout you out for how many months that you subscribed, right? Like the longer you're a subscriber, the more like there's kind of like an impact from like retention.
What if you could subscribe to a well driller?
Yeah.
Or a team? That's a super interesting idea. What if you could say, I want to subscribe to the team in Malawi of 200 locals who are out there every day. And there was some sort of feedback loop. And that's where your money was going. That'd be an interesting idea.
But I'm wondering, like, there's something. I mean, I think that Live Strong campaign was really smart because they had something that was visible. And so, is there a way to make it visible, or like a way to form an identity around it to the people, around you, as a subscriber?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the product is. Is it a hat? Is it a T-shirt? We've got merch. I'm not sure that people will wear silicone bracelets anymore. It feels like you just don't see much of them.
2000s, but maybe there's some new version of that.
Yeah. Well, if anybody has any ideas, hit us up. I think it'd be great to have that social proof out there. I'm a Spring member. I'm an advocate of clean water. And, we've made it really easy to join. So if anybody's listening and you want to join the Spring, it takes like 20 seconds. If you've got Apple Pay, it takes 5 seconds. Just go to thespring.com and we'd love to have you at 10 or 20 or 40 or 100 a month or whatever you can give. That is the future of charity water, I think. And that's the future of our impact, is a lot of people showing up with loyalty and consistency. Not just people driving by once and saying, "Oh, I heard a podcast. Here's $100," and going back and never coming back. Going back to their job or their work.
Yeah. Amazing. Any final things you want to impart on the audience?
Well, I'm just grateful for you and your story, and you've been an inspiration to me, and grateful for your generosity, and You know, like it's again, I think it's the beginning of this journey, and gosh, I want to do so much more. The team wants to do so much more. We know how to do so much more. So, you know, people that are listening that can contribute or have ideas or bring us in to speak at your company. You know, here we are trying to figure out how to get to that next moment of scale and impact with a 15-year track record, you know, having made a lot of mistakes. And, you know, you're invited to give us your ideas or reach out, please. We need the help.
How can they get a hold
You
of?
never know who's listening, Justin.
No,
you never know who's listening.
I agree with that. You never know who's listening.
I guess the last thing I'd say is the beauty of clean water is that it can actually bring together such a diverse community of people who might fight about politics, they might fight about social issues, they might fight about religion, but like, it is an inarguable common good. It is the most basic need in the world. But yet, 771 million people, you know, 2 Americas full of people, a tenth of the world today will go without dirty water. Moms will give their kids dirty water, knowing it's risking their lives. And it's a solvable problem. We have not created the will to solve the problem. We have not rallied the resources, but there's not a single person we can't help. There's not a single person alive today who needs to drink dirty water, who should be drinking dirty water. And, you know, look, I was born into a middle-class family in Philadelphia, and because of the way I was born, I'll never have to drink dirty water. My kids will never have to drink dirty water. But yet, you know, I'm in the 90%. And for 10% of the world, by no choice of their own, you know, they don't have this basic need met. So I think, you know, I guarantee most people have never thought of getting involved in this issue, or, you know, it's just not something that's top of mind. You know, you woke up this morning and you had your coffee, you know, maybe with filtered water. You know, you took a long shower, you brushed your teeth, you know, you went to the gym and you had water there. It is something that's just not really top of mind for us. It just comes out of taps. It's everywhere. It's ubiquitous. But that's just not the reality for, you know, for so many of the world's humans. And, you know, we have to get this done. We have to get this done. The resources are there. There's so much abundance. And, you know, hopefully we can continue to fight, to invite people to make us a part of their story and invite them into this. And, you know, you never know who's listening. So you're all invited to partner with us at year 15 and help us do more.
Amazing. Thank you, Scott. That's an
Thanks
incredible
for
story.
giving me the opportunity. It's great to see you and chat with you again.